How to lose belly fat, chest fat, and love handles, starting from 30% body fat all the way to 10%. Hi, my name is Dr. Michael Diamonds and I'm the founder of Sculpt by Science. In 2015, it was the first time that I went from 30% body fat to 10% body fat, and it was by far the hardest and the longest journey that I've been on. The truth is, because once I figured out the science, I still had knowledge gaps in my journey, and 2 years later, with more knowledge and motivation, I joined a 90-day transformation competition, and these were my results. I've used this technique multiple times with my clients like JL, and he was 36 years old, starting at 251 pounds, and being a new dad, I used this techniques that I'm about to share with you in this video, and it helped him drop 53 pounds in 16 weeks. Gary, at 45 years old, a firefighter and paramedic, was able to build muscle and lose fat at the same time, and he started at 196.7 pounds, and in 16 weeks, losing 24.4 pounds, hitting a low of 172.3 pounds. These 5 simple steps that I'm going to share with you require a lot of attention to detail, and I'll show you exactly how to execute them. Before I even start with these 5 steps, the first thing that I did was take a long hard look at myself and ask whether going from 30% body fat to 10% body fat was worth pursuing. Is it what I should be focusing on, and whether it was realistic? From my previous experiences, I knew getting to 10% required a huge amount of sacrifice. The average body fat percentage for men that I speak to who want to work with me is around 25 to 30% body fat, and for women, it's around 30 to 36%. You do have to note that women are supposed to have a higher body fat percentage than men. This means that the average man and woman would need to reduce their body fat by more than half to finally see their abs. If you weigh about 200 pounds and you have 25% body fat, then that is 50 pounds of fat tissue entirely on your body. You need to lose 30 pounds of fat to reach 10% body fat. This represents 105,000 calories that you need to burn. It's important to set yourself up with a contract and understand the requirements of your contract to yourself. You could have an incredibly successful diet and exercise program. You could potentially transform your life better and even add 10 years of life expectancy. So step number 1, I call it the perfect deficit. To go from 30% body fat to 10%, it's the first rule. You need to be in a caloric deficit, and you need to eat a nutrition with the diet that follows that. This is where the total calories burnt each day through your exercise and non-exercise activity and your metabolic rate outweighs the calories you consume from food and drink. The larger the deficit, the more fat that will be burned. But create it too big, and if it's too big of a deficit, and the diet can be very hard to follow. If you're very overweight, starting with a 500 caloric deficit is a good target. If you are close to getting abs and you need to adjust your diet slightly, a smaller target between a 200 to a 300 calorie deficit is probably a good idea. And there are 3 ways to create this calorie deficit. Number 1, you can reduce your caloric intake. Number 2, you can increase your caloric output through your exercise, your running. And number 3, you can do both and reduce your caloric intake through your diet and increase your caloric output through exercise. And the third option makes the most sense, as you can create a bigger deficit without having to diet or exercise too intensively. If you want to create a 500 calorie deficit, for example, then you could perform 200 calories worth of exercise and reduce 300 calories from your diet, or 150 calories from your exercise and 350 calories from your diet. It all depends on how much time you have. Find the ratio that is going to suit your lifestyle. If you maintain a 500 calorie per day deficit, then that is 3,500 calories per week. 500 times 7, which is equivalent to 1 pound of body fat. 1 pound of fat scientifically shown to be equivalent to 3,500 calories. In the case of my client Gary, let me show you exactly how I calculated his macros so you can do the exact same for yourself. So I'm going to show you guys different ways to figure out what your macros are. Please, once you've calculated them, follow them. They are in theory, and you need to apply the theory to see if it truly works, and you need to give yourself 7 to 10 days of utilizing it before you finally make a decision. So I'll show you exactly one of the ways I calculated Gary's macros. Again, when I build this for my clients, there's so much more I take into consideration, but for this video, I'll show you what are some of the best ways you can do it. Now, I'll be using different calculators, and I'll be showing you guys how to use it. Number 1, we'll utilize the Sculpt by Science calculator. We'll also be utilizing artificial intelligence from OpenAI, and I'll use this as an example. So the information we're going to need, right, that plugs it into this formula, the Milton-Sundraware formula, is the age, the weight, the height, their gender, and how many times they plan on training. And before I plug in the formula, this is a quick cheat sheet so you know. 1 gram of protein is equal to 4 calories, 1 gram of carbs is equal to 4 calories, 1 gram of fat is equal to 9 calories. Another thing, we want to also figure out what the person's personal activity is, right? We all do different amounts of activity, and that has to be taken into consideration. And the way I like to determine is how many sessions of training will you do? Someone who's sedentary has no exercise, they're doing nothing. Who has light exercise, anyone who trains 1 to 3 times per week, I call lightly active. Moderate exercise is anyone who trains 3 to 5 times per week. And someone who trains 6 to 7 times per week is very active. And someone who's extremely active is someone who trains 6 to 7 times and then they have a job like waitressing, they're an air hostess, some physical work, or they're in construction. Let's utilize the Sculpt by Science calculator. So here we're going to put in Gary's age of 45. Gary's a male. In height, in centimeters, Gary comes out to be 180 centimeters, and in kgs, Gary came out to be 89.2 kgs, right? That's 196.7 pounds. So I'm going to put in here 89, and as I mentioned before, in this calculator's case, I would say that Gary is active. He's doing daily exercise or intense exercise 3 to 4 times a week. So that takes him to 2782. So we're going to put him here at active 2782. Let's also utilize a different calculator just so we can increase our confidence in this data. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this information and I'm going to tell the AI, I want you to calculate my maintenance calories based on the data below. And then I'm just going to paste the information, basic info. Perfect. So the AI has utilized this info, as you can see, and they have calculated Gary to have a result of 2,932. 2,932 is Gary's maintenance calories, 2,932. So we have the one that my calculator calculated to be 2,782 and what the AI calculated to be 2,932. If we want Gary to lose a pound of weight a week, all we need to do is subtract 500 calories. We know 500 calories times 7 days in the week is 3,500. So 3,500 is equal to a pound. And if he's eating less than that, he's going to lose a pound a week. 2,782 minus 500, that's 2,282. And for AI, we do 2,932 minus 500, 2,432. And as you can see, it's not drastically different. It's about 100 plus minus calories between the two. And to take it a step further, if you want to be even more accurate, we can take the average between my calculator and what AI has given, right? So we're going to take 2,432, the AI's macros, plus Sculpt by Science macros, and that's going to give us 4,717. And we're going to divide that by 2 so we get the average, 2,358. What I like to do is create simplicity. I am just going to give what a rounded off number will be. We're going to start Gary off at 2,400 calories. That is how many calories Gary has to be eating to be in a caloric deficit. So again, we could have totally started Gary at 2,282. We could have totally started him at 2,432. However, finding a nice average leaves us more confidence. And again, we have to take this number and put it to work. Now, let's calculate how many macros and what macros Gary should follow to get his result. So the first thing we want to do is figure out the amount of protein. A simpler way to calculate Gary's protein, right? I am going to take the average of his weight and his height. So we usually give 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, and he's 196 pounds, so I'm gonna give him 197 pounds, right? And because I said I want to get an average, I'm also going to give him 1 gram of protein per height in centimeters. So his height is 5'11", so he's gonna eat roughly 180 grams of protein per height in centimeters, and I'm gonna get the average of those two numbers. Gary comes out to being at 188.5 grams of protein. Now again, for the sake of simplicity, so that's 188.5, right? For the sake of simplicity, I am just going to give him 190 grams of protein, and that's exactly what I did, right? I gave him roughly 190 grams of protein, so that's figured out. Now, the next thing that's really important, we figured out the first part. We also want to know how many calories is in that 190 because we're going to use it later. So 190 multiplied by 4 calories, because 1 gram of protein is 4 calories. 190 grams of protein is equal to 760 calories, right? Now, the next macro we need to figure out is the fats. And in general, this one is very easy. All I do is give 20% of the total calories and I allocate that towards fats. So what I'm gonna do is take 2,400 and multiply it by 20%, 0.2, and that's gonna give us 480 calories, right? And then to figure out how many grams of fat that is, we're just gonna take 480 and divide that by 9, and that gives us 53 grams of fat. Now, to figure out how many calories we're gonna give towards carbs, it's just gonna be the rest of it. So to figure out the carbs, 2,400 subtracted by 760, which is the calories from protein, and we're gonna subtract that by the calories from fats, which means 1,160 calories are gonna go towards this carbohydrates. And to figure out how many carbs that is, all we're gonna do is we're gonna divide that. Again, 1 carb is 4 calories, so we're gonna divide 1,160 divided by 4. And Gary's gonna start on a beautiful 290 grams of carbs. And that's his macros: 190 protein, 290 carb, and 53 grams of fat. And over the weeks, we slowly decreased Gary's macros. He got as low as 1,900. And in the next step, I'm actually gonna show you how we were able to keep him to eat so much food over 16 weeks because we used the next step that I'm about to share with you. So all we did, every 2 weeks or so, we would maybe only decrease 100 calories. There was a whole month we didn't decrease anything because his sleep was on point. He was training really hard. He was doing everything right. And he was following the plan to the T. But let's move on into the second step. Step number 2, the cardio accelerator. Research has shown that both body fat and carbohydrates are burned and the proportions vary with the intensity of the exercise. It also shows as the exercise intensity increases, so does the reliance upon muscle glycogen for energy over fat stores. As the exercise gets more intense, so does the proportion of the energy coming from glycogen compared to fat. This is why very low intensity activities like walking will tap mainly into fat stores, whereas high intensity sprints pulls much more heavily from your carbohydrate stores, your glycogen. Both moderate intensity and high intensity interval training are effective for fat loss, but it depends on which you prefer. When you exercise, our body uses 3 sources of fuel: fats, carbohydrates, and protein. Being that the goal is fat loss, using fat as fuel would be ideal. HIIT will pull more from your carbohydrate stores. Consider this example from the American Council of Exercise. Assume you just burn 200 calories from 30-minute low intensity running. Approximately 120 calories comes from fat. Now assume you just burn 400 calories exercising at a higher intensity for the same amount of time. Of those 400 calories, roughly 140 calories comes from stored fat. Of course, this example assumes that your exercise sessions are equal in length. If your HIIT workout is shorter than the slow cardio session, you may end up burning more fat with the slow cardio. And this is exactly what I did with JL, and this is exactly what I did with Gary. Let me show you what protocol I ran them through on average. So week 1 to 4, they did low intensity steady state cardio. They did 2 sessions of 30 minutes and they did 6 kilometers an hour. That's 3.3 miles per hour at a max incline. And I both gave them 10,000 steps. From week 4 to 6, they went from 2 sessions to 4 sessions at 30 minutes at the same speed, max incline. So all I did was increase the frequency. And then I made them do 12,000 steps. Week 8 to 10, they continued doing low intensity steady state cardio, but I moved them to 5 sessions instead of 4 at the same speed, at the same incline, but I wanted them to hit 15,000 steps. From week 10 to 13, they did 6 sessions of 70 minutes, same incline, same speed, and I got them as high as 20,000 steps. Watch till the end of the video, and I'm also going to share with you the exact cardio protocol that I followed with Gary, and I'm also going to show the week-to-week nutrition that I utilized. With Gary, we started him at 8,000 steps, and he went through it after 3 days. He's like, 8,000 is really easy. And we bumped Gary up to 10,000 steps. By week 4, Gary was as high as 12,000 steps. By week 8, Gary was as high as 15,000 steps. And by the end of the program, Gary would fluctuate, because he's a firefighter, he was fluctuating anywhere between 15,000 and 20,000 steps. And that is exactly why we didn't have to cut so many calories, because Gary was burning so much from moving his body. And I found this to be very beneficial in the sense of losing weight, because you get to eat more and it's a lot more sustainable. And all you need to do is focus in on walking more. So I highly recommend for you, start at 8,000 and then slowly increase it over time. And that's exactly what Gary's cardio routine was. But let's move on into step number 3, intermittent fasting. At its core, intermittent fasting is simply a style of dieting that concerns itself most with when instead of what you eat. And the general goal is to spend more time every day and or week in a post-absorptive, in a low insulin than a postprandial high insulin state. You see, with the normal type of diet, you eat food every day, every few hours, let's say 8 a.m. until 9 p.m. That is, every day you eat food intermittently for 13 hours and eat nothing for 11 hours. Due to the time it takes to process food and depending on the size and the composition of your final meal of the day, this means that the majority of the time your body spends in this post-absorptive state will be when you're asleep. That's 6 to 7 hours, that's probably on average. With intermittent fasting, you flip this around. You eat food intermittently for, let's say, 8 hours and eat nothing for 16 hours. So what I personally do to follow the plan better was doing a 16-8 intermittent fasting. During my fast, I would drink 1 to 2 cups of black coffee, which is shown also to have a fat burning effect. My general rule would be no more black coffee after midday. Once I got home from the hospital, I could eat anything that really fit in my macros. Because this was so enjoyable, it made me even more consistent and it allowed me to lose more fat because I was adhering to my diet so well. I had 0 cheat meals in those 90 days because the diet that I was eating felt like I was already cheating, because in 8 hours, I have so many more calories to spend. This is what I do with all my clients. When we start working together, I ask them, tell me all the foods you enjoy, even the ones you consider unhealthy. Pizzas, burgers, burritos, ice creams. And when I design their plan, I take into consideration their favorite foods, and I know I'll be able to fit them into their diet so that they can follow the plan for the rest of their life. 2,400 calories was very high for Gary, and he was struggling to eat the food, so there was no point in introducing intermittent fasting so early. But once we got to the 2,200, 2,100 range with all the steps he was doing, that is when we introduced intermittent fasting, and then the tool helped him. It is a tool, it isn't the end all be all, and Gary was enjoying his process tremendously. But let's move on into step number 4, high intensity interval training. High intensity interval training, or HIIT, or sprint interval training, is a form of interval training. It's a cardiovascular exercise strategy alternating short periods of intense anaerobic exercise, basically going as hard as you can go, with less intensive recovery periods where you're catching your breath until you're too exhausted to continue. High intensity interval training is not this big secret to fat loss. However, it can be a powerful weight loss tool when you know how to use it. Research has shown that both fat and carbohydrates are burnt and the proportions vary according to the intensity. It also shows as exercise intensity increases, so does the reliance upon muscle glycogen for fat stores. Multiple studies, such as those conducted by Laval University, East Tennessee State University, Baylor College of Medicine, and the University of New South Wales show otherwise. The research specifically shows that results reinforce the notion that for a given level of energy expenditure, vigorous exercise favors negative energy and negative lipid balance to a greater extent than exercise of low to moderate intensity. So these are a few ways of how you can incorporate HIIT. Again, HIIT is a great tool to use in your plan over the 16 weeks. You don't have to start from the very beginning. So this is how I did it. I like using an air runner, and I would sprint for 30 seconds all out, and then I would walk for a minute, and then 30 seconds and repeat again for a total of 3 minutes. This strategy, I would only implement it from week 8 onwards. If you're on the heavier side, it may be too intensive for your knees, so this would be the strategy used when you've already lost about 10% of your body fat. In my case, what I use right now in high intensity interval training and what I did with JL loved playing basketball. So in the beginning, he was doing 1 game per week. We moved him to 2 games as he lost 15 pounds. We moved him to 3 games eventually, and he was doing 4 games of basketball in the week once he was able to get about 40 pounds off of his physique. And the same includes for me right now. I'm doing 3 sessions of boxing at 1 hour. Now, of course, that entire hour isn't as intense, but I burn as much as 900 calories. And you guys, let me show you a clip of that and me going through a session like that.
901. in 65 minutes, 179 heart rate. Nice work. Thank you, man.
But that's exactly what I do. And then step number 5. These are the supplements that I recommend to all my clients as we go through a transformation period. Number 1 is a whey protein supplement. And all the supplements are supposed to do, you don't have to get any of this. I'm not sponsored by any company. A whey protein will supplement. It will help you hit your 200 grams of protein. You can get 8 ounces of egg whites for breakfast. You can have 2 scoops of a whey protein as a snack, 6 ounces of steak for lunch, and another 6 ounces of chicken breast, and voila, you'll have your 200 grams of protein. And if you didn't have the whey protein, if you didn't have the 2 scoops, you'd be at 150. So that's what whey protein really helps with, easily digestible, and you can take it around with you. It's very convenient. The second supplement that I highly recommend is a multivitamin. As your calories come down, you're probably giving yourself and not giving yourself enough micronutrients. And the way I think of it is just getting all the bibs and bobs, getting your machine well oiled so that everything functions in cohesion. A multivitamin is highly recommended. Another supplement that is highly recommended is creatine. It is a well-researched supplement, and research has just shown it's beneficial to have in terms of your entire arsenal. Personally, I don't take creatine, but it is highly recommended. It will help you improve your endurance, improve your power output in the gym. The stronger you are, the more muscle you will have, and at bare minimum, it'll help you maintain the muscle tissue. Another supplement that I highly recommend is some sort of pre-workout throughout your 16 weeks. You will come off of energy being in a caloric deficit so long. So I personally take pride. This helps me burn more calories. What I really like about it, that there's no beta alanine. It keeps my focus really high, and overall what the pre-workout does, it just makes me burn more calories. It keeps me more active. Finally, one massive thing that we did with Gary is improve his sleep quality. Once we were able to really focus in on sleep with Gary, his weight would fly off as a result. He was less hungry because he was sleeping more. He was making better choices. He felt so much better. So the 2 supplements I recommended for him was melatonin. It's not addictive. It just helps him get to sleep quicker and stay in deeper sleep. And for him to have consistent sleep throughout the night, I recommended magnesium glycinate pre-bed, 1 hour before bed. And these were the supplements. I may be forgetting one, but that is the entire 5 steps that I implemented. They both slept really well. I highly recommend you focus on sleep. I should have a whole video dedicated towards that. But I can promise you, if you follow these 5 steps consistently, you will see amazing results. So if you did enjoy the video, leave me with a gentle like. I'll greatly appreciate it. This helps more people find this, and this allows people to get into great shape. I gain happiness from seeing everyone see success. And let me know in the comment section down below, what are the things that you guys have done yourself that you feel has really helped you with your transformation that I may have missed. But I'll leave it here. I'll see you guys in the next one.